Hello, I'm Dr. Julie Sprague, principal at Horace Mann Middle School, and with me today is Dr. Dean Hess, principal at John Muir Middle School in Wausau. We're here today to share some information with you that we previously shared with parents and community members on September 29th. This information relates to potential curriculum and programming changes at both middle schools in the Wausau School District.
Over the last 2.5 years, staff from both Horace Mann and John Muir Middle Schools have been collaborating together to try to come up with different programming options that would better meet the needs of our students. Some of the key aspects of this work is to maximize student achievement at both middle schools. Some of the other aspects of this would be to make greater levels of database decisions during the educational process with students. Currently, we recognize that we've put forth a tremendous amount of effort to create interventions and enrichments for students, and we utilize data to place students in those different situations, but there's also room for growth in the everyday educational process. You'll also see on this slide that 80% of students, our goals that's been set by the education department, is that 80% of students will be proficient in both reading and math within the next 3 years. In order to accomplish this, we're involved in professional development with our staffs at both schools. We're also involved with ensuring a guaranteed viable curriculum, but we also have to make sure that we have the structure that supports this work. Some of the other different aspects that we're looking at is ensuring that we're laying the foundational skills at both middle schools to ensure that our students are college and career ready, and that the work that we're involved in is in alignment with the district's shared key interests. If you're interested in looking at more data on either middle school, you can access this information by going to the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction and going underneath what's called the Public Portal. And you can choose the Wausau School District and then look at the information there. When we talk about database decisions, currently we're at about a 40 to 50% proficient or advanced at the two middle schools in reading and math. So you can see that we'll need to realize about a 10% increase in student proficiency over the next 3 years in order to meet the goals set by the Education Department of the Wausau School District. This next slide shows what's happening at the 6th grade level currently for programming on the left-hand side, and what we're looking at for potential programming at the 6th grade level should we go with another type of a master schedule. Currently, students have English language arts for approximately 86 minutes, and we're looking at reducing that a few minutes in order to get a greater amount of instruction in other areas. An example of another area would be math. Currently, students have 43 minutes of math, and we're looking at having students involved in a block that would actually be 2 periods or 82 minutes of math. Science and social studies stay similar. They actually give up a few minutes in order to increase the amount of math instruction. But one of the things that we have a potential of realizing with science and social studies with new models is an ability to block science and social studies. By that we mean that a student could be involved in science one day for 80 minutes and then the next day have social studies for 80 minutes. In doing so, it would allow instructors to have different types of activities along with instructional practices to try and help students to better make connections in the learning. One of the changes that we're looking at also is going from a model where students currently receive 3 days a week of PE and 2 days a week of music to a model which splits the PE and music evenly, where students would get 2.5 days a week, or be like an every other day schedule. The allied system in the proposed schedule would stay similar to what students currently are involved in. Students would be involved in art, keyboarding, and health. But one difference is moving away from a team study concept to what's called an IE, which is an intervention and enrichment course. This would allow us to actually have a period of the day that was slotted specifically for students that needed interventions, which would better support some of the intervention work that we're currently involved in. And it would also enable us to create a greater level of enrichment opportunities for our students. And this is an area that we've identified where we could put greater focus to assist students that already show proficiency and allow them to gain more knowledge in an area of their choice. This is an example of what a student's schedule looks like under a proposed schedule of the future for 6th graders. They would have 2 periods a day where they would be involved in allied classes, and again at 6th grade we talked that those would be allied similar to what they currently have, which would be art and keyboarding and health. And then they would also, for the second allied, be involved in PE and general music. The big difference for a sixth grade student is you can see there's 2 periods of math is what's being proposed versus the 1 period that they have right now. Lunch would actually be a little bit shorter. It would go from a current period at John Muir of 43 minutes down to a 30-minute period of lunch. And it's actually approximately 30 minutes now at Horace Mann, so it wouldn't be any change for them. Again, you can see that IE period in there. So students that needed an intervention in an area like math or reading language arts could be involved in that intervention during their 6th period. The big difference here is kids that are already showing proficiency would be able to take an enrichment class, which could potentially be an enrichment of a core class or an enrichment of an allied class. It might even be a class that doesn't currently exist, but we could create in order for students to expand their knowledge. This is taking a look at what we currently offer our 7th grade students at the middle schools, and again, what they could potentially be involved in a differing master schedule. Currently, students receive 86 minutes of English language arts, which would be similar to the future, which would be approximately 82. Again, the big change would be a block of math versus what we currently have of only 43 minutes. Again, just like the 6th grade programming we just looked at, science, and in this case geography at the 7th grade, would remain similar. They would each lose 3 minutes. However, again, the science and geography would have the ability to block. So they could go on an every other day type block where one day a student would not have science, but they'd have 2 periods of geography. And then the next day they might not have geography, but have 2 periods of science. Or they could just maintain it the way it is and have 1 period each day. Similar to 6th grade, PE and music goes from a 3-2 split to a 2.5, 2.5 split. So PE loses a little bit of time and music gains a little bit of time. The big difference between 6th grade and 7th is the fact that when you get into 7th grade, a student has more choices that they can now make relative to what allied class they'd like to be involved in. And we're actually going to show that to you in the next slide. Also, we have another IE time at 7th grade. Again, just like 6th grade, a student is either going to be involved in an intervention at that point, or if they're already showing proficiencies, then we could have them involved in an enrichment in order to try and build their capacity up to advanced, or build their capacity in a very different area. Taking a look at what a 7th grade student schedule would actually look like. In this case, this student is involved in English language arts for 2 periods of the day, and then they go into their allied classes. In this situation, a student would have an ability to actually choose multiple classes that they would be most interested in. It's important to note that we would still be able as a student to take any of the classes that they can take now. The difference is they potentially might not be able to take all of them. So if a student is currently interested in taking orchestra and general music, they would be able to still do that. Or if a student is involved in choir and wants to be involved in band, they'll still be able to do that. However, when you look underneath the electives that are listed at the bottom of this slide, a student wouldn't necessarily be able to be involved in all of them. They would not be able to take general music and orchestra and band and choir, art, family, consumer sciences, tech. They would have to make some choices about what they're most interested in. So part of what's happening with a new schedule is where you're redirecting some of the minutes of the day towards an increased amount of math instruction, and we're also trying to maintain student choice in the same time. As the student moves through the schedule, we talked about they would have IE and lunch. Then you see social studies, science, which again, that 7-8 block of time could be used for 2 periods of social studies one day and then 2 periods of science the next. Or it could be just like it is on the screen where a student has both classes each for 40 minutes. At the end of the day, there's your block of math. One of the questions that was brought up in the meeting was parents were wondering, are we ready to do instruction of math for 2 periods? Will students get bored or will they be overwhelmed? And it should be noted